steel in gears. It pulls you in and doesn't let go.
Oops. I'm still working on that transition. I thought I had the wrong video in there. But anyway, welcome, Dave.
Glad to be here.
Happy Super Bowl Sunday.
Oh, wow. Okay, great. This is awesome. I like college football. I'm not the biggest NFL fan, but yeah. I think it's going to be interesting to see what this Super Bowl brings to us in terms of commercials. I remember you commenting on the Super Bowl last time, and it was prophetic because you pointed out that I think last year was the first non-woke Super Bowl we had in a very long time. But, nothing was really improved, especially on the commercial end. It just felt kind of more bland.
Well, I've got a stat for you that just came out today, which is that in 2014 they did a survey, and 25%, about a quarter of the Super Bowl ads were considered risque. In the past 3 years, it's been 0% every year. So nobody thinks they're risque at all. And that kind of goes exactly into what we're going to talk about today and what you've been talking about with Slop World. You put it very well in this tweet that we'll get to, but that it's basically like, what have we, we've gotten rid of the woke and now we're in slop dull land, which is like, its own depressing kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
But first, before we get into that, this is your second time on the show. Definitely one of the best in the business, Dave. I always,
well, thank you.
Love your stuff. And you published a thing that I just read today that I actually listened to it with the AI voice on Substack. And the AI voice is so good on Substack. It's amazing. It's like so well done.
Although it makes me sound like Coach McGurk from Home Movies.
I don't even know who that is.
It was an Adult Swim. It was an Adult Swim cartoon.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The main parent figure had this very gruff voice that sounds exactly like the Substack. I might be using that voice reading feature. It's nothing revolutionary, but it does allow you to kind of get text to voice so you can listen to Substack articles while you're doing chores or whatever.
Yeah, which I love. I love doing that. And it's like so much. But the voice isn't, I feel like up until really recently, the voices they were always a little distracting. But this one, it seems like a real person reading it, at least.
Yeah, I actually kind of like the ones that are more mechanical because I feel like the new ones, they get the intonation wrong.
Oh, yeah,
and
sure.
So this is certainly not, it doesn't read it like I would read it.
True. Well, it does get intonation strong. That is true. I actually noticed that a couple times. But in any case, they did a fantastic job reading this piece that you wrote. It's long. It really evokes a lot of emotion. It's called Ghosts in the Shadow of the Mouse, and it's about you going to Disneyland.
It was a little autobiographical.
Yeah, and it's like a gonzo piece, really good, and you really get it's so rare to read writing like this in today's world that's emotional and deep, really invokes emotion in the reader, because it's about your dad, and it's sort of built around this two things. One, it's a little bit, maybe I'm misinterpreting it, but it seems to be a little bit of a rallying cry to start retaking California, or at least start thinking about building things in California, which is so funny because literally I've spent the past 2 weeks thinking and plotting this exact thing. So it's funny that you wrote this, but then also it's a little bit of a commentary centered around the image of Pleasure Island from Pinocchio. So can you remind, what is the Pleasure Island from Pinocchio, and like why is that sort of the center of this piece?
So, originally Pinocchio is this Italian novel from the mid 19th century by this, Italian nationalist Collodi. Again, kind of, he was very political, but his politics don't map well onto the 20th century left-right distinction, as you might imagine for Italian nationalists in the 19th century. And he wrote Pinocchio as kind of this cautionary tale for young Italian men who he felt were getting sucked into vices of the time. And obviously Disney takes this, and this is a sort of a quasi fairy tale from the 19th century, and he uses it to make, I think Pinocchio was his second feature length movie. I can't remember. It's one of the very, very early ones, right? With Fantasia and Snow White and Dumbo. It was one of the really early ones. And he really sort of makes it more personal. And the most harrowing scene, obviously Pinocchio is this living puppet. He wants to be a real boy, and his father sends him to school, but every time he tries to go to school, he gets intercepted by kind of these bad peer pressuring type figures in the form of a cat and a mouse. And first they try to get him to go into showbiz, and the next time he gets lured to this place called Pleasure Island by this very demonic looking coachman. And this is like essentially an amusement park, but the secret behind it is that all of the young men who are in this amusement park get transformed into donkeys, and then are packed off to do horrific manual labor and completely dehumanized. And it's funny because, well, I guess it's very it's hard to express the feeling. This is like a harrowing scene if you want to rewatch the original Pinocchio with your kids as a parent. If you watch the Pleasure Island scene where the kids are turned into donkeys, it's something that they never put in a modern movie, and it expressed in many ways Disney's unsettled feeling about amusement parks, the idea that you were in the devil's playground. And it's sort of, it was sort of, you could see this sort of as being his motivation for creating Disneyland about 10 years later, which is like, I know you've been to Disneyland, obviously you're a Southern Californian. It's really hard to explain to people who haven't been there, but the reason why people like Disneyland is not because of the rides, it's because it feels oddly wholesome. And that was always the point of Disneyland, was to be this sort of wholesome place that didn't feel like Pleasure Island, that didn't feel like, the devil's playground. But the strange thing is that despite Disney's vision of trying to make Disneyland aspirational, it ended up kind of just being this place that it kind of ended up corrupting people in a different way. The infamous Disney adults is something that people have been talking a lot about recently, especially, it seems like Disney adults have been in the news a lot recently as like this class of millennials who just orbit around consumer products, especially Disneyland, for some strange reason. And, I use that as kind of a launching point to examine sort of the feeling in Southern California, or California generally, which is just this feeling that you're participating in this, like, this eternal game of fakeness and a lack of connection to sort of real history. And I kind of sympathize with you because, as a Californian, not a Southern Californian, but a Northern Californian, I am very much feeling the desire to kind of come back and rebuild. This feeling that it feels like in the modern world that we're kind of at the end of the road and kind of trying to run from these things. I mean, I think people have tried this. We've tried to, not that I am saying you shouldn't try to create intentional communities or run from modernity or seek places where you have more power. But the idea that we just can kind of eternally run from these problems is, it doesn't feel like it. It feels like we need to kind of take a stand and actually build something where our homes are. And for me, that's California, if not Anaheim.
Well, I think we've both been feeling kind of down. I mean, you had another tweet. I asked you to come on because you had a tweet, I think, a couple weeks ago where it was like, I've been feeling like weird malaise or, just a kind of down. And I've been feeling that exact same thing too. And It's probably post-election, I felt really great for about a month, like I felt like ecstatically good. And then, there's probably a little bit of a hangover in there to some degree, but also I think it comes back to this thing that you tweeted about today where you're saying that woke is receding, but it's just revealing a destroyed cultural ecosystem underneath.
Yeah.
And I guess what I would say is it's like there doesn't seem to be any way to achieve consensus on culture, and I can't see any way to do it because on the one hand you have the Borg, which is learning how to use the right as sort of a fake, as like a fake puppet, right? Which is like really depressing in its own way. And then on the other side, you have kind of these attempts by people to be outsiders and do it on the outside way. But the problem is then it's slop also in another direction because it's all just self-congratulatory self-publishing by people who are complete. You say here the different categories, and the third category is Spurg, who might see the problem and solution in theory, but are totally incapable of fixing minor personality problems that would allow them to be effective.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's so many different angles you could take this from, right? But if you think about the height of kind of right-wing enthusiasm, it was for me, it was like 2016, 2017. I mean online. I don't mean like we're experiencing a moment of enthusiasm right now as well. But in 2017, the feeling of enthusiasm on the right was just inescapable. And that was because, I hate to say this, it was because the right wing was sort of detached from reality, existed only online. And so you had this kind of this notion that's popular among, and I don't want to say like autistic people, but it's a stereotype of people on the spectrum where they think like, if only I can say the right graph or have the right factoid, then like my enemies will crumble away and we'll be in phased world. And it was kind of weird when you think about it because the support for right-wing ideas was so much less in 2017 than it is in 2025. But at the same time, the enthusiasm was way more because there was this perception that like all you had to do was kind of like disenchant the illusion of wokeness, and then all of a sudden, like, anime would become real or something like that. Like, nobody's under this illusion anymore. No one's under the illusion. I mean, I guess like there are still people out there, and the problem also was that, as I learned sort of in 2020, that once this entertainment product failed, and it was obvious that you could not create a revolutionary society in a Discord server, and it was apparent that a greater amount of effort was needed to interface with actual people. Like half of the audience of the right just disappeared, right? Like they went to like Roblox Discord servers or some other autistic ideology, or maybe a lot of them became Nick Fuentes fans or whatever, which is, I guess that's still right wing, right? But I don't mean to put down Nick Fuentes, but his fans are infamously, insufferable. I'm sorry, man. It's like,
I actually kind of like Nick Fuentes. I mean, of course, I can't really like him, but like
I'm not talking about Nick Fuentes. I'm talking about his fans.
Yeah, his fans.
To be clear, his fans.
I have a soft spot for the Groypers, though. I always have.
I've
always had a soft spot for them. I mean, I don't want to go to their parties, but I understand why they exist.
No, I do like. I do know some Groypers who are good guys. I want to put them down collectively, but I'm just saying that like the thing is that what we are realizing in the recession of wokeness is just the enormity of the problem. It's like you pulled off this parasite and like our entire skin just came off with it. Now there's like this gaping, gangrenous wound, and we're thinking like, okay, are we going to have to like now lop off the entire arm? Like who's even prepared to do that? And you also look at your allies like Elon Musk, and you're wondering like, okay, like he was sort of a fair weather ally to begin with. So what's this going to mean? Is he going to be like off doing something else, like while we try to like recreate a sustainable human life on this planet? Like this is it's not exactly clear where the energy is. And this is also something that my friend Black Horse mentioned continuously is that like in about, we're early adopters in most things, Isaac, but in about 4 months, everyone's going to be feeling what we're feeling right now.
Yeah, I think
and there's going to be a massive identity crisis on the right.
Yeah.
And, it's not exactly clear how to see how it resolves. Now, that's not the end of the world. There's going to be opportunities in that. And the right-wing ability to organize and create institutions is miles ahead of where it was in 2017. But it also creates this, this cultural problem, which is that very few people can create meaningful cultural artifacts in this environment. Like, and it's not like there's nothing that's fresh. Like I experience things that are fresh when I read older stuff, and occasionally when I read stuff in our circle. But we're like, relative to the culture generally, we're a fringe circle, right? So like, I read Georgia Buddha from Lomez, and I'm like, this is amazing. But then like, but then it's like, that's it for like the year. Or I read occasional stuff on Substack where it's like, this is an amazing piece of writing.
What's Georgia Buddha?
Oh, that was the Passage Prize winner. It's a short story name. And so recently he released I haven't read the rest of it. Was a very good
Georgia Buddha?
Yeah, it's like Buddha, but from Georgia.
By V.N. Ebert.
I think you're paused a little bit there.
Yeah, he's actually really good. I've seen. I haven't gotten like too deep into it, but yeah,
exactly right.
He's always been very impressive. I've found, he's cool,
and he's pretty young too, right? So like we're just catching like this is a very promising career starting, and it's things like that I'm looking for, but like that's confined to like a very small like space of online.
It's right, and the problem is, at least as far as I can see the problem, it's like. There is no the chasm. What we're I really am finding myself understanding why a Moldbug was so insistent on culture, on the old institutions. I think I disagree with him. I don't think that like when I hear him talk, I don't think that. He's saying monarchy is actually a stand-in for something else, which is the ability to create transcendent works. Yeah. And I think what he wants is the ability to create transcendent works. I think that's what Musk wants. I think that's what everybody wants, right?
Well, this is hard if we're following the civilizational model, right? Because what happened when Rome became a monarchy is that like its ability to create transcendent works just like I mean, it reached its high point in Augustus, but that was like the high point before its culture its culture and its birth rate went straight into the toilet. And it was a good time to be alive. Like historians look back on the Flavian emperors and the early imperial period as being like, this is a great, stable, and peaceful time to be alive. But after the generation of Augustus, like there was no more cultural production to speak of that was very notable.
That's very interesting. So and Moldbug, he always says, well, imagine America was created by Apple. And it's like, okay, well, Apple was a monarchy or whatever he wants to call it, but it was a monarchy in a democracy. Right? It's like it wasn't just a monarchy. And so again, I don't even think it really matters that much what your model is. Sometimes you get those magic moments, and in America we really had them for a little while. And sometimes you don't. And I don't really think it really matters what your structure is politically, at least around it. You just have to have some ability to have people be free enough and constrained enough simultaneously to make really good stuff. And in America, we figured out that formula for a little bit. But yeah, sorry.
People are forgetting about Apple too. I mean, Steve Jobs was like a spiritual leader. I hate to say this, but like, and he wasn't religious. I mean, he was kind of like a Buddhist or like vague deist. There's got to be something more than this. If you read his autobiography, typical boomer spirituality. But like, he didn't invent anything. Like like all the stuff he made, like the iMac was it was like a PC, but like different, like color, like a piece of candy. And like the iPod was like an MP3 player, but like, the reason why he was such a visionary is that he imbued these existing technologies with a spiritual quality that told a story about what they were for. Like Apple products have teleology, right? Microsoft projects do not have teleology, and like teleology is this product is designed like with a destiny, like it's for something, right? And so like when you picked up your Apple iPad, which is iMac, which was a shitty computer in 1996, and it looked like, you know, a Jolly Ranchers candy with a monitor attached to it, like, you know, people did good work. It was really weird because people did good work on iMacs and like they wouldn't do good work on PCs, and that's because the iMac had like this story. It sounds bizarre when you think about it, but like it has a story about how like this is the beginning of like your digital experience as a creator.
As a creator,
It
was about. It was that you're the creator. You're the creator
in your hand, and now you are the creator. You are the Prometheus, and it doesn't matter if this Jolly Rancher has like half the processing speed as like the guy with the Pentium next door. Like you are the creative entity, and people like, and that prophecy was like real. It like people did good work on their iMacs. Like it made it true, just like Disneyland, right? And like Disneyland is wholesome in a way. The problem is like this initial vision, it runs out of energy because the humanity that's attached to the vision gets degraded. And like, you know, right now I'm not inspired by new iPhones. Like as a matter of fact, I'm kind of just like I couldn't care less about my iPhone. Like, but in 2009 it was like a revelation. It was like a spiritual experience.
Well, and maybe the one thing Steve Jobs did actually invent is the podcast.
Oh yeah.
And what's funny is that it's exactly in line with what you're talking about. It is the ultimate form of self-creation expression. And everything he did came back to, this is what I do with my clients. I give them the single-minded message, and everything that all the big brands have one. And you know, you always hear Zuckerberg. He switches it up because he obviously has no spine.
Zuckerberg is singularly bad at this.
He's really
do you remember that commercial from Meta that came out with like the mascots being that was like one of the worst. Like it's like the anti-Mad Men. It's one of the worst commercials ever.
Which one was it?
It's for the metaverse. It was in 2021, 22, somewhere like around this time. It was either early, I think it was early 2022, and he's coming out with this metaverse, and it's like a discarded like Chuck E. Cheese mascot that then goes online. Like he has a shit life, but then he goes online and finds all of his friends online. This was the most epic misreading of America's mood that has ever come out in a commercial in my entire lifetime. He completely creeped out his own audience. He completely confirmed their preconception that he was a robot. It was a branding nightmare. Yeah. And that ad capsized that entire project, I'm convinced. Like Mark Zuckerberg is really bad at creating stories around his
Well, and he switched it all up from a certain point to, he started by saying, once he got his brand together and he would go on and say, and he always tips his hand because he says it 15 times, and he says it 15 times in the same way. He started by saying, we're the human connection company. Everything we do is to connect humans. And he called his conference Connect. The Meta logo's a little connection. Yeah. You know, sorry, go ahead.
But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but then I hear the next week that he's letting AI post to Facebook autonomously. Like all his platforms, Instagram and Facebook, are covered in AI slop right now. Like I do not get the impression when I'm on Facebook that I'm in a platform that serves humans rather than algorithms. I get the distinct impression that I'm on a platform that serves algorithms. And that is not, like, I don't believe intellectually that is an incorrect perception. I believe that is a real perception. So, I mean, again, like I do appreciate Mark Zuckerberg's ability to be agile in rebranding himself, but like he always does this like too late. And it's always like a day late and a dollar short with Mark. I don't know what it is. I mean,
So what do you mean a platform designed to serve algorithms versus people? What do you mean by that?
Well, I guess this kind of gets into the whole slop thing. I mean, so in Facebook, so I play nerdy board games. So I killed my Facebook account in 2000. I mean, I don't know. Correct me if you're wrong. Facebook became unusable for me in 2017. Yeah. I was actually one of the defenders of Facebook well into its later years when it became uncool, because I used Facebook to coordinate my church groups. And all the boomers were on it, right? So it was super useful to me. But after like the Trump derangement syndrome set in 2017, it became unusable because all of the Trump TDS people would get on to Facebook, and they would make all of the Trump ambivalent or pro-Trump people like completely not want to work with them and completely alienate them. And I kind of compare this to Detroit. You know, I went to school in Michigan, so I've heard all these stories about Detroit. Like Detroit in the 70s was like Facebook in 2017. It was just like a madhouse of violence. And like Facebook in 2025, when I came back on it to find like nerdy board game groups, which I never followed up with because I have no time. But when I come back in 2025, Facebook is like Detroit in 2010. Like it's a desolate wasteland. There's like no one's using it, and all the stuff on my feed is like clickbait TikTok stuff, or it's literally AI generated, which is generated off an algorithm of AI clickbot stuff. So it's just basically like, you know, it's the stuff that, you know, it's the stuff that like LLMs excel at, which is doing like slight variations of existing data, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
I don't know anyone real. I mean, I know people real who have the account, but they're all like dead accounts. They don't do any updates. They don't talk about their lives. They're on there to receive updates from like one group that's still using it as legacy. And all of the other, like I have spent time on Facebook when I reinstalled the app to find these like game groups, but half of it is just me getting sucked into like a click hole, like looking at these like viral videos of like guys jumping off like the Matterhorn and like, you know, like these like crazy GoPro camera footage.
Well,
right?
no,
Like
for me, it's all girl. For me, it's girls like going like this. It's
no.
Girls like going like that.
Oh my God.
Every single time, which goes to show that's probably what I like. My eye lingers on slightly too long, and then you know, like that's all there is.
Thank you for mentioning that. That's another component too that I realized. Okay, so like, here's the thing, Isaac. Like, I have a horrible time with this. Okay, so this is what's terrible. So I do like pulp stuff, like Conan the Barbarian, which usually has illustrations that are like kind of like borderline, you know, what it is like. I forget, was it Frank for Zeta or whatever? I can't remember all the illustrators who did that. But you know, like, so you like one of those pieces of art, but then the algorithm feeds you like, they feed you stuff, but they feed you like comics and illustrations, but each time they like increase the dosage of like near pornography a little bit more and a little bit more. And the thing is, it doesn't matter if you don't click on it. If your eye lingers on it, the algorithm realizes that you stop there more and it feeds you more of that stuff. So it got to the point on Facebook where like where my eyes were betraying me, and my love of kind of like scantily clad women in Conan the Barbarian, like I won't say tasteful, but like not pornographic, but still kind of like, you know, sexy stuff, like that transmogrified into something that was like undeniably pornographic by the fact that my eye was pausing on the risque things more.
Yeah,
like, well, it's horrible.
It's really evil. I mean, do you remember also the most evil version of this and I still can't believe more people don't talk about this, was Elsagate. Do you remember Elsagate?
Elsagate. Oh,
this was the worst thing in the world. It's actually perfect for your Disney piece. Elsagate was this thing that happened. It must have been like 2016 or something, and there was YouTube videos involving, of course, all of kids' favorite little things.
I remember
and it would
that.
be like Spider-Man and Elsa. But then they would. Do you know who the artist Mike McCarthy is?
Yeah, I think.
So Mike McCarthy is this like pure satanic artist who just does disgusting everything, and he does these videos of like Santa and the elves like smearing poop and having sex with each other thing. And they were like Mike McCarthy-esque, creepy, uncanny valley things for kids, but then they would go to this like dark, horrible place.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
It was so evil, dude. It was the most evil thing ever. And it was exactly what you're saying. It was like, it's for kids. They love Elsa. And then they go take this horrible, bizarre video and they start watching it. And of course, it gets tons and tons of views because it's like their favorite characters. But then it brings them to this dark, evil like place where they'd be like pooping on each other and like really creepy, like vaguely sexualized things. It was like the most subversive thing I've ever seen in my life.
And I haven't caught anything like that for my son, but there's a few times when like these algorithms, like they pitch down like I really have to, anytime like he's exposed to anything like YouTube, I really have to keep an eye on that. That's it's so nefarious. I mean, but so if you want to say about like, our friend Kevin Dolan from the Exit Group, he says like human controlled government or human controlled institutions, like there's some will behind it. I do not feel like Facebook has a will behind it. I do not feel like human beings are in the driver's seat in Facebook. I feel like everything that I see on people's Facebook pages was put there by an algorithm. Everything that's like things that, it's funny because even my own feed, the algorithm is not what I want. It's what my eyes lingered on, right? That's the thing. Like I would not have told the algorithm. My ego would not have told. The algorithm is essentially doing an end run around my conscious ego and communicating with my id, and then using that to populate my feed. Yeah. And that's what I see on everyone else who's there. It's just like this automatic process where the worst, like most limbic part of my brain is in control of what gets put in my public profile, which is of course the exact opposite of what I want Facebook to actually do, which is like, it's a disaster. I don't know. It's just, this is one of the worst managed intellectual properties of all time.
Well, but I think, why I think they do that? Because I think they've figured out advertising so perfectly, like every other ad platform, and this is a thing I'm dealing with every day. All advertisers complain Twitter's a total waste. It's just like pouring money, like it does nothing. And nobody actually looks at what you put on there as an advertiser. YouTube is same. It's like, oh, you'll get a pre-roll, blah, blah, blah. It's the traffic's never really good. But every advertiser just loves Meta. They cannot get enough. They just want to pour all of their money into it because for whatever reason, because you know what happened? Do you know how it actually works?
Is actually weird. That actually, because for some reason, whenever I log on, maybe this is because like Facebook I only use it to interact with guilty pleasures and sort of like board games, like miniature board games and, like fantasy novels are a guilty pleasure of mine. Right. So when I log on, I'm more in a consumeristic mindset.
Yeah, you're trying to consume something.
So
yeah. And they figure out.
Whereas when I'm on Twitter, I'm just like, fuck you. Like, I come onto Twitter like as a spirit that's gonna like stamp I hate this on everything I see. Right. So if I see your brand pop into my Twitter feed, I'll probably hate it.
Get out of here. Yeah,
right. Coke.
Yeah. No, screw you. Yeah, exactly. Whereas on Instagram, they're like, you're like, oh, I'm looking for things that I'm interested in. Let me join this group. Yeah, well, they've certainly, if they've done nothing else right, they have certainly figured out how to advertise because all the rest of the platforms can't really do it, at least in any sort of like satisfying way. But you know how it works. It's really funny because what you do is it's not like you just put an amount of money on an ad. It's like a kind of weird like soup where you put in 10 pieces of creative and you put in a certain amount of money and you just say go. And then Facebook figures out which of the pieces of creative people click on its own. And then it like feeds the money into that ad as much as it can. And actually some advertisers have problems because they don't get anything that really works. So as much money as they put in it, they can't actually spend it fast enough, at least in any way that is beneficial to them, right? Because there's always trash. Facebook will give you trash views all day if you pay for it. But there's actually a limit to how successful your ad can be. And you should see the ad, like, we put a ton of work into our ads that we do for our clients, but actually the ads that work the best are, of course, the crappiest Canva, weird thing that just happens to like stick in people's brains, and they watch it slightly more, or they like it slightly more. So yeah, it's sort of it's an id machine, as you said. It's entirely, it's like the least captive audience of all time. It's like there's no captivity.
But that it feels like everything. So this is sort of the point. So the categories I mentioned on like the boomer slop tweet, which I like literally just wrote a few hours ago, waiting for my wife to get out of choir practice.
Yeah. So wait, let's look at these. Let's look at these categories. I'm going to pull them up so people can see.
So I'm living with family right now in intergenerational housing, like millennials are supposed to do, and and it's amazing because how should I put this? Like the boomer generation and the Gen Xers that are of the boomer mindset, they're locked into this kind of petty individualism of kind of mass consumption. And so it's like they understand that things are bad. Like they understand that things aren't going well. They understand that something in the past caused this, but the only thing they can really do is like watch Fox News and relitigate the battles from the 90s. And there's sort of a similar blue state version of that. I always joke my wife's family is not American, but they're like red staters in Canada, and my own family is like deep blue staters in California, right? Like University of California people, right? You can imagine, right?
You've written about this before, I think.
Yeah.
The tension between these groups.
But they have this similar thing where like all boomers and Xers know something is wrong, but then like Trump derangement syndrome is like the blue state version of like Fox News watching. Like Trump, like the TDS boomers all think that like what's wrong is Trump. And if Trump went away, then like the 90s would come back, or like the Obama version of the 90s would come back, which is, in some ways, Obama is kind of like the 1990s end of history version, but just with more of a progressive veneer on it. And like the problems of modernity would be solved. But then at the same time, so they watch all this stuff like Fox News or whatever their TDS blogs are on Substack, which if you ever looked at the stats, like the TDS blogs, like they blow all other blogs right out of the water.
Like what? Like which ones?
Oh, I don't know. Library of Solano has a bunch of them that he reposts constantly. Like, what is that guy that was like the reply guy for Jeff Tiedrick would be an example. Do you know him?
No.
Like he's like this ex-boomer rocker, but like all he does is just write like this like unreconstructed fuckwits who voted for Trump. Like people have created like Jeff Tiedrick, like like sentence generators. Like you just put a bunch of like big college words in front of like swear words, and then apply it to Trump followers, and you've got like your Jeff Tiedrick sentence.
That's Dudley Newright, right?
Dudley Newright did a whole article on that. That was one of the best articles of last year.
That was really good.
Yeah, that was amazing. But the boomer, but this like TDS is just boomer mentality for the left. They like anti-Trump stuff, so they don't have to think of the hard problems we're dealing with. And in the meantime, like they're feeding all of the systems. They're feeding the same systems that are part of the problem.
Okay, wait. So let's lay this out here. You got your three categories. What are boomers are one of them? It's on the screen.
Yeah.
What are the three categories of what? The three categories of slop world.
Yeah, the three categories of slop consumers.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So what are these?
So the other one are like the nihilists, and I include kind of like far leftists here. So these are people who are like, I want to join the winning team. And I think this is sort of a millennial predilection to like one, like there's this deep-seated millennial desire to be on the winning side.
Win. Right. Yes.
And like they don't really care about what side it is. They just want to be on the winning side, which I think that's what drove a lot of the wokeness to begin with.
Yeah.
And the reason why wokeness like died is like in 2024, like the God bled, like really bled. Not like a little bit. Like in 2016, it could have been a mistake. It could have been whatever.
Yeah.
But in 2024, like the God really bled, and now it's not obvious like who's on the winning side of history.
Right.
Like nihilists want to be on the winning side of history, and so like they'll consume anything, like or
as
or
long
or,
as it's winning. Wait, are you saying the God bled? God bled?
The God bled, like
the God,
the God that bled, like I think it comes from that Rudyard Kipling story, The Man Who Would Be King, where you can watch the movie with Sean Connery and Michael Caine, who eventually married the woman. But in the movie, he marries this, like they're going to like this Indian tribe that has never seen like white men. They think they're gods. And Sean Connery marries one of the natives. And because this is Rudyard Kipling and like, interracial marriage has to be punished. Like she scratches him and they see that he's mortal and then they kill them. Right?
Oh, okay. The God bled. Got it. Okay,
it was the ironic ironic thing is that woman actually is Michael Caine's wife now. So they epically did not follow Rudyard Kipling's advice. But I guess neither JD Vance. No, but yeah. So like once you see like the reason why that progressivism these days seems a lot more nihilistic than it did in 2017, which is why like nobody is believing the communists anymore, because half of them are just there because they want to be on side I win easily.
Got it.
And
yes. This is the nihilist group,
yeah. So they want to be in some side that validates them, and and there's also a little bit of an effeminate attitude towards this too, where like you want like the Osama bin Laden thing, you want to be on the team with the strong horse. Right. The great political scholar of our age, and this is like very ironically, Osama bin Laden described a very effeminate attitude towards power that which is I guess true of all late stage civilizations, that people determine their allegiances by witnessing who is the strong horse and then joining the side with the strong horse.
Yeah, the reason you're bringing up Osama is because he said famously, place a strong horse next to a weak horse and see which people will choose, right?
Exactly.
That was kind of his outlook, yeah.
And in many ways, you could see 9/11 as Osama bin Laden's attempt to make the god of the American empire bleed, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Now you see, like, you can actually hurt them. These people are not immortal. They're not on the right side of history. This can go any way. This is a war that has two sides to it. And, I don't know, obviously his worldview, was unwholesome in a lot of ways, but like that's a core element of our age. And then there are like, I guess I said like my third category is like the Spurgs. Like these are people who they get the theory, but they're so online and detached from what is required to make an actual political movement work. They're always looking for ways to kind of like do one neat trick and have everything fall into place. And this is like what a lot of the 2017 energy was, remember the alt-right from 2017? Like there's all this enthusiasm, and it got dissipated because they came into the real world and realized that like, just spurging out in real life doesn't actually solve your political problems.
Well, so say more about this, though, because I keep hearing about these personality problems. This is something that Chris Rufo has also said. And I feel like it's the kind of thing that if I don't know what you're talking about, I probably have them. So what are these personality problems?
This is kind of like this, if you want to break this boomers, nihilists, and Spurgs back to generational, I could have just said boomers, millennials, and Zoomers.
So the Spurgs are the Zoomers.
The Spurgs are it's obviously there are boomer millennials, there are Spurg millennials, and there are nihilists in all generations. Yeah. And there are Spurgs in all generations. But like if we were to break it up generationally, that's how so like the greatest way to see like why Zoomers are in their 20s right now. So like they're at their highest surge of energy. But in many ways, they're the most enervated generation that's ever existed. And they're really energized online. Like they're really energized virtually, but they have a hard time translating that into real world energy or committing to something that's like solider and doesn't, move around so much. And, this is something that people complain a lot about Zoomers, and it's not just in people's imaginations. Just like the problem with boomers aren't just, dreamt up by millennials.
Right. But what actual personality problems? Like, what do you mean? Like, what are there? You're saying that they're too, I think what you said a second ago, like they're looking for quick fixes. Yeah. They're not really serious about. What do you mean?
So like, for instance, like they'll see. So for instance, like they think that like having a right abstract argument will mean that you don't have to build relationships or good optics. So like they'll come out like I don't really want to get into this topic, but like they'll take something like HBD, which I always say controversial, but there's a lot of evidence on the like pro side of that, and they'll like throw HBD at people's faces and go like, now agree with me. Well, that's not how this works, right? Like that's not how it works, because people aren't looking for
it's facts. It's not like facts win every time, right?
Facts don't work. Because the problem with this especially with the HBD stuff, is most people aren't looking for like, okay, what side is the correct one? They're looking at the question of, okay, what does our society look like after I acknowledge that this might be true? Like how do we reorganize? How
Right.
do I make life make sense?
Totally.
And also they'll also things like this is a very 2017 thing. I don't see people doing this very much anymore, but like what counts as white? Like this is the stupidest conversation of all time.
Yeah, which is
Like,
everybody's having that today.
yeah, exactly. It's like it's a stupid. It's like it's an irrelevant question for our age. Or to pick one of my own things, like this is something that probably you don't have to deal with, but I have to deal with this all the time. There's two versions of it. There's like the pagan versus Christian thing. Like, which this is this conversation does not exist in the real world, or even more spurgy, the Protestant versus Catholic thing. So you'll have like even leaders will participate in this. They'll like have like these long drawn out conversations about theological problems, differences between Protestants and Catholics. Like this is a very interesting question from a theological point of view, and like there's nothing more important in my mind than the humanity's sacramental connection to God. And so I think it's an important debate, but like they're treating this like it's a political issue. Like, but there's no public debate on this. There hasn't been a public, like active political issue on this since like the 30 Years' War. Right?
Yeah.
this is just like Spurgery, and like nobody is gonna be like, oh wow, like you totally own the Council of Trent. I guess I'm a Lutheran now. Like it's just like that doesn't happen, right? I mean, it doesn't happen this way. Like conversion doesn't happen this way. So the thing is that what people want, what people are looking for is they're looking for like nuanced art, a story about the future that has hope, deep human connections, an ability to be kind of firmly pro your own collectivity without denigrating or without going to war against anyone else's, right? This is what people are looking for in the real world and are trying to feel out. Like, but these are all informal things that require introspection and relationship building. Like they're deeply organic. And like the internet Spurg just wants like dump like arguments and graphs and like tirades on this deep organic process, and it ends up like with this total mess. And and this is the problem too, is like the classic, like I would keep on feeling like I'm like bashing people with genuine like spectrum problems, which is like everyone these days, right? Like everyone has some spectrum disorder, but this is just like the sort of internet Spurgs, and not using this in a medical sense, but like they also create tons and tons and tons of conflict, and like they burn bridges with people who should be their allies. They make it harder to organize.
I think what we're talking about here is just, sorry to interrupt you, just to frame it, is like, okay, so I'm writing a piece on AmFest. MAGA is red, right?
Yeah.
Why is MAGA red? Why is MAGA red, and why are the communists red? And actually, the Republicans started as blue, and then over the years they became red.
Yeah.
Because blue is the color of authority. Pharma is blue. Goldman Sachs is blue. All the banks
blue
are
chips.
blue. Yeah, blue means authority. Red means inflammation. It's like it's the complaint. Red is the color of complaint. Blue is the color of authority. And so it's, as the Dems became the authority, they became blue. And as the right became the complainers, they became red. And what's so funny is now we're having the red people are now going to have to become a little purple, right? Which is like, it's funny because AmFest is like a spectrum between red and blue, and it's like bright purple. And that's like exactly what's happening. And I think what we're seeing is like, okay, it is fun to be the crazy complainer. The autistic graph guy, Steve Saylor, right?
Yeah.
That was fun. That was really fun for a while. But now, I think what's the reason we're like kind of like feeling uncomfortable is, all right, well, now we got it. Now we won. So where in becoming purple, how do we achieve what the left had for so long, which was an ability to create transcendent art?
Yeah.
At least just on the cultural side. How do we have that ability? And there doesn't seem to be any way in, because like you're saying, the nihilist millennials that are the win, win, win. We won. Let's keep winning, winning,
Yeah.
winning. Like those people don't seem to be able to create really good art, at least that I've seen. And the autists are really hilarious and they can create great memes and they're funny. But as for the reasons you're saying, they can't get their shit together enough to create any type of institutional curation for good art.
And they struggle with the
Yeah.
organic dimension of the art too.
Which is, what does that mean? What's the organic?
The organic dimension is like the part where it touches life and has kind of like the taste of reality.
Yeah, sure.
As opposed to like
The human,
memes,
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like memes are kind of like this limerence to them
Right.
that makes them like connect to a particular feeling.
Yeah.
But the organic dimension is sort of like more baked into a narrative.
Well,
of
you
life
can
and
do that,
existence.
Dave. Dude, that people really need to read Ghosts in the Shadow of the Mouse because you got some emotion in here that I haven't really read on Substack, maybe ever. Because you're going,
yeah,
you
it
got
was
your
painful to
dad.
write.
Yeah, it's your dad. It's because you're mixing it. You're mixing it well. You're mixing like this kind of esoteric analysis of Pinocchio with your father, with California, and it's also kind of inspiring. It's like a call to action. So people can do it, but
No.
I think for the most part, you're right. They can't.
And like when we're talking about Ebert, right? Ebert's, I can't remember his first name, right? Like that's what made his short stories so good, is because it had that same kind of like gut feeling in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
you gotta have
organic, like, and it's funny because he's a Southern writer, and this is a tradition. Like this is a very long-standing tradition in America of the Southern Gothic writer that has that earthy quality to it, right?
It's like Faulkner, right?
Yeah, Faulkner,
Who else?
or a Connor, or there's
Right,
or even what's the guy that died recently that everyone loves? No Country for Old Men.
Cormac.
Cormac. Yeah, he's also part of this.
Yeah.
I mean, Texas is kind of questionable, but it's in that in between state, right?
right.
And but this is like I think this earthiness is what needs to be kind of rediscovered to escape slop, is to kind of like rediscover the human dimension of the internet. Or
or how about just a hero once in a while? It's like, what about like an actual hero that we respect? That's something that where's that? All the prestige TV, it's White Lotus, which is fantastic, but there's what is the other thing? Even like, did you watch the Safdie thing, The Curse? Prestige TV. Oh, there's the Rupert Murdoch thing, Succession. The thing that all prestige TV has in common now is there's no hero. It's super honest, but you hate everybody. You hate everybody in it. And it's like, can we get like a thing that has like an actual hero that you like in it, that you actually feel emotional, that's not just like some sort of.
Well, that is interesting,
character.
but people, I don't know if it was on your channel or on someone else's. I feel like maybe you were a guest, but you discussed how it feels like all genres suck except for horror. Like, it's not, horror isn't like, we're not in a golden age of horror.
No.
But like of the wounds that have been done to our culture, like there occasionally still is a good horror movie.
Yeah.
I genuinely think, we were complaining about, what is it, the Eggers guy, but like his original Witch movie
was
is
great.
actually genuinely good.
So good.
Yeah,
I completely agree.
Yeah, as soon as it goes out of the horror genre, especially, and that's why I really hated The Northman too.
Yeah.
Well, I hate a lot of his movies, but
I hated all of them besides The Witch, which I loved. I thought The Witch was great, but
he seemed to have. Well, yeah, he seemed to. But again, it has like The Northman has that problem you were talking about, right? Where like this is not a horror movie, so it seems like this needs to have a quality of heroism to it, but the heroism is impossible to discover, and. Not to spoiler alert, but what's her face? The two actresses, the actress and the actor, they've got zero sexual chemistry, and they are both very attractive people. Like, how could it? I don't know how I could care less about two attractive blonde people making love, but somehow he made it meaningless.
How did you make this meaningless?
Exactly.
Well, so I had you, speaking of horror, I had you watch Terrifier 3 because there's this meme going around, and it started by the way, one thing that artists are doing incredibly well right now, I have to say, is criticism. And you're doing it Jack, Perfume Nationalist, is doing. He writes these like crazed movie reviews. It's one of my favorite things that I see.
Oh, I gotta look
so
at that.
insane.
I have my next article is about criticism
Yeah.
itself. So
Well, it's like art is criticism is kind of having a thing. But anyway, with Terrifier 3, he says it's the most deeply Christian movie since The Passion of the Christ 20 years ago.
Terrifier 3 is the most deeply Christian movie since Passion of the Christ.
Yeah, the influence of which is seen throughout. Its domination of the box office, blah, blah, blah. It's a Trumpian Christian movie that is equipped with intensity warranted by the evils of today, and the form it takes to battle evil may register to dusty, unimaginative conservatives of vulgarity or decadence. But then he goes on to say, actually, it's very wholesome and you know, Art the Clown. So you watched this. What did you think of Terrifier 3? A glimmer of hope.
I didn't particularly like it. It was like a worse version of Hellraiser, I guess. That was my impression, right? Like, I was like, my wife hates slasher movies we were watching, and I'm like I was like, if you hate, it's like, I hate this. I'm like, well, Hellraiser is better. I mean, I guess like the components are there. I guess one thing I've noticed, and this is true about Nosferatu too. Like, I guess arguably Hellraiser is what Nosferatu is if you gave it like worse aesthetics. It's just like, because Nosferatu, like usually there's kind of like a spiritual component, like a spiritual pollution that lies at the heart of like the monster that feeds them energy. And like, I didn't see the first two Terrifier movies. I read the descriptions on Wikipedia, but what sort of that's also true in The Witch. In The Witch, like the heart of The Witch is a spiritual pollution, which is what makes it so terrifying, right? But in Terrifier and in Nosferatu, like it's just this like monster shows out of nowhere and then it starts like murdering people, like, you know, just and Nosferatu had excellent aesthetics, but like it left me with the same feeling, like what's the point of it? Just like okay, so like the monster is bad. Like that's just
there's
it,
no
right?
real there's no actual right.
It's kind of funny in Nosferatu and in this one. I noticed one interesting thing is that the family life too, like there's in both of them there's a family that gets destroyed, right? But in most past iterations, and this is like uniquely 2025, especially in Nosferatu, I noticed this, where like there is this incredibly like Teutonic looking family, and I keep expecting the husband to be evil in some way. It's like, because you know they got this target in their back, like for the horror movie target, like you know that something bad's coming. And I keep on expecting them to show themselves to be like bad in some way, but like they don't. Like they're perfectly wholesome, right? It's just And
we did have the girl though. There was the annoying media girl.
Oh yeah, the podcaster.
And so she did get the podcaster got her comeuppance. But it was actually funny because he didn't spend that much time torturing her, and she was really the only one who deserved it. Actually, he spent more time torturing the guy who was like kind of likable, like we liked him, you know, and so that was funny.
Or the Santa Claus guy, right?
That was a good scene. That in the bar, that was a pretty good scene, man.
It's funny. Like usually, I feel like in horror movies, like it used to be, at least in the 80s and 90s, like all of the guys that got killed did something to show you that they were kind of assholes.
Right. Yeah.
And now like that feels like it's no longer a thing in modern horror. Like people can do all the right things and it's still like, oh, we're just going to like torture them for hours.
Yeah. Right. Which is maybe the point. But I will say there does seem to be this, because remember the people are interpreting Terrifier films for some reason as right wing. And I think it's because some of the stars have gone out as right wing, and then the director had to come out and say recently, this last week, he had a whole apology thing where he was saying, these movies are not right wing. Stop saying they're right wing. Like he like succumbed to the pressure to like not be. He was like, all I care about is good old wholesome, you know, murder. It's like good old wholesome total torture porn, absolute gore fest. And so why do you think for some reason people in like the commentariat are interpreting this as like somehow based, more based?
I think it's just like, I mean, all horror is kind of implicitly right wing. I've said this before. Like, this is, you know, horror is humanity's instinct for being punished for their crimes, coming back to them.
Yes.
And so, you know, I see all these left-wing horror fans, and you know, there were a lot of them in like 2019. I don't want to like list off breadtube channels, but like H Bomber Guy and like Thought Slime were like these two like very cringe when you look back on it now, but like these like left-wing horror fans, and they try to say something that like The Shape of Water is what horror always wanted to be. You know, what's that guy's name? Del Toro's.
Del Toro. Yeah.
But like The Shape of Water is like, it's a betrayal. I mean, you could argue that I hated that movie.
I know. No, I've
really
heard you talk about this movie several times. I hated it too, so I'm with you.
But yeah, I actually really hate all of like Del Toro is another one of those directors where he had like some early good movies, but then you wonder if like all his early movies were just a giant mistake, like Eggers. Like, did you just accidentally make a good movie?
Yeah, he made like one
just
good
accidentally
one. Yeah.
it was Devil's Backbone, just like the accidentally good one. Then we had to sit through all this other schlock, which is like the same stuff, like the same self-indulgent stuff over and over again. But he does not make horror movies because he did I think that he did The Orphanage. That was a genuine horror movie, which was like a good, like that was actually a real, that wasn't Del Toro, but whatever, it doesn't really matter. But the thing is, they don't understand horror. They think horror is like has monsters in it and has like gore, but what makes horror kind of like terrifying is this like feeling, like I said, a spiritual pollution, and that there's a crime that needs to be punished.
Yeah.
That's like why The Shining is just like one of these eternal horror classics of all time. Like it's just, there's so many layers of it. It's so much better than the Stephen King novel that it's based on, because what is it? Greatest director of all time, or one of them. Kubrick. Yeah. Kubrick understood like what was going on in a way that the original writer did not. Like, I think the original writer was like, this guy is just like a wife beater and like, and maybe a kid beater, and like this is his pathology playing out with the help of demonic assistance. And that's the story, right? Like, Hick beats his wife and gets worse when he gets in contact with the devil or whatever. That's like a standard Stephen King plot line.
Yeah.
But then Kubrick is like, well, it's layers, right? Like, so he beat his wife once, but that's not the question. The question is, was there something darker and more sexual underneath that? And then like, okay, great. Like there is this hotel, but there's like a darker spiritual pollution that has to do with like Native Americans. And right. Like there's all these like hints, like all of these little symbols that are scattered throughout the hotel that like they imply that like what you're saying in this horror, like only one guy dies in that entire film, as far as I can tell, right? Yeah. But like all of the things imply like a guilt, a spiritual pollution that is not quite stated. And that's now flowering forth in the horror. But like the real thing you're worried about is like that, like what is going to be revealed. Am I going to see something that's like, really, really like that indicts my spirit? The same way like you feel like Mulholland Drive, that like every scene is going to be like something horrible is going on behind the scenes that I'm not privy to.
Right. Which you mentioned in your piece. So totally true of horror, and I think you're right. That's why it's like kind of inherently right wing. Where are the glimmers of hope, though? If not Terrifier 3, who is anybody out there figuring this out? Sound of Freedom, because you're right. To me, it's just a chasm. It's a chasm between institutions that are rotten and startups that are naive, or and I can't see any way to build the hierarchical necessity of curation that you need in order to infuse these startup creations with the prestige that they need in order to like become meaningful, or to simply have a system of like an editorial system or a pressurized system that forces people to be good enough and gives them the freedom to be good enough to actually make stuff. It's like, so this is what the great tweet from Dan Baltic, where he said, getting rid of Weinstein was like getting rid of an apex predator in your environment. Like, it was great, but then suddenly a long dead tick has returned and taken over the, like
we're just inundated with like insects now.
And it's all, there's no control. Like, you need that apex predator. And so, yeah, how do we achieve that? Is anybody doing that? I mean, it seems like
Well,
you're talking about coming to California. So,
I'm more of a critic than a cultural creator,
right.
but I mean, like I guess the optimistic side is that it's not like no one's doing this. It's not like no one's taking shots. It's not like there's no successes. The problem what we're having with is that so like Angel Studios, I think that's like the Sound of Freedom thing
Yep.
you were talking about like last week, and so like I'm not saying they're done or anything, but like everyone constantly comments or has been commenting for the last month that their early fare is much better than their later fare. Like they fell down a boomer rabbit hole, right? Like so like what the problem we're having right now is that people get like good ideas and they do them at a small scale and then they kind of get glossed over by the culture generally, or like they get more money behind them and then all of a sudden they like what happens with Angel Studios. Then all of a sudden you're making like these kind of like boomer
yeah, right.
Like the later Angel Studios films feel like Pure Flix films, and like they're the same thing. Like the edge is off of them, and that's
because they're all about like the woman overcome breaking barriers, breaking barriers. It's like, dude, this completely got destroyed immediately.
Or not to go too online, but the the Critical Drinkers film that came out like a month or two ago. Right?
What was that?
Oh, he's this online critic, the Critical Drinker. He's one of the more popular YouTube channels out there. He had this he did this YouTube channel was like he has like a drunk Scotsman, and like that's his shtick, right? And he reviews like woke movies and inserts drunk jokes in along with anti-woke, anti-girl boss stuff. But he gets all his friends to give him money to make a movie, and it's like this like boomer tier like Born Identity with like a girl boss in it. Like he falls into the same trap that he tries to escape. And I think like the problem we're dealing with is kind of like algorithmic capture, or not even necessarily like explicitly algorithmic capture, but just like the algorithm exerts this kind of gravitational pull on our culture that takes us back to these forums that feed into the boomer, the spur, the nihilist archetype. Like the Norseman is the perfect nihilist movie, right? It says nothing. It just kind of, or like even Nosferatu is the perfect nihilist movie. It says nothing. It looks cool. There it is, right? And like Angel Studios started producing boomer slop at a certain point. So the thing is that I feel like this is a gravitational pull, and we're trying to break free of this gravitational pull, and more people are taking like moonshots with their individual creations, and like maybe like the creative forces at Angel Studios will decide to go and take another moonshot and make it right. But right now we just have this problem that is the gravitational pull of the boomer algorithm. And that is going to be with us for like a very long time. And we're just going to have to get adapted to this kind of like high gravity situation and, take lots of shots at it. That's the only way until somebody can replace Harvey Weinstein.
So how do you take a shot? Like, what do you mean take a shot at it?
Well, take a shot is like, get together capital and money and then produce something of high quality that has like high introspection, and that takes a lot of risks and is not optimized for the algorithm.
Right.
Because once it gets optimized for the algorithm, then it's going to be like, the reason why Angel Studios makes the movies it does is because now they're designed. I'm pretty sure either you said this or your guest said this like last week. Like these movies are designed to have like really popular trailers. Like that's what they're designed to, like, and like all the boomers were like, oh, that's an awesome movie. Bonhoeffer, thumbs up. Like I want to be seen as the guy who likes the Bonhoeffer movie. But like no one's gonna actually like, I'm not saying Bonhoeffer was like, people criticize his theology or his politics or whatever. I'm not touching that, right? But like he's the ultimate person who everyone likes on social media, but no one has like a deep love of. Like to contrast him with like Maximilian Kolbe or Edith Stein, if you want, like I said, if you want Christian victims of the Third Reich, those people deeply love them outside of social media. Like they'll tell you why they love their personalities because they're actually like they have this substance to them, right? the I lost my train of thought, but
No, you're good.
the
You're
task
saying-
the task is going to be when taking a shot. Well, by taking a shot, I mean make something that's meaningful to you that costs money that does not directly feed into the algorithm.
Right. Yeah. What do you mean doesn't? That doesn't. You mean isn't like dictated by the algorithm?
Yeah, that isn't
You're not.
dictated
You're
by
not
the algorithm.
trying to make it for the algorithm. Yeah, I think that that's really true because it is kind of amazing. It's like we're only scratching the surface of this, but it is amazing how the slop era, the two poles are equally tyrannized by the algorithm. Because on the one hand, you have girl bosses, the money people, the people in Hollywood who will say, I can't produce your thing without a celeb in it.
Yeah.
But they're saying that because of the algorithm. And then you have the guys down here who are like, well, I'm completely independent. I'm going directly to my audience. And I'm also a slave to the algorithm.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like Mr. Beast versus, whoever the girl boss in charge of Amazon Studios are. And they're both completely tyrannized by the algorithm. And it's like, you're right. In order to get free from this, what needs to be created is a bold middle layer of people who are like, oh, you know what? I'm actually a cultural curator and I actually think this is good. And yeah, they might not click on it, but they're going to learn to love it.
Yeah.
They will love it later, and it's like, it takes balls to do that. And somebody who's going to be able to convince people to give them enough money to just keep doing that, for at least enough time to, break through, I guess. Right.
I have to ask you, like, what was the last Hollywood movie you saw that was like not horror? Horror can't be used and not slop. I know the last one for me. I have seen a lot of like not slop horror movies. Like I would say like Annihilation and like Hereditary and But like, what was the last non-horror, not slop movie you saw coming out of Hollywood?
God, out of Hollywood?
Yeah.
I can't even. I mean, the last movie I remember actually liking that was like even mainstream in the slightest was Another Round, which was Swedish. But which I think won the like foreign Oscar, but that's that's a Thomas Vinterberg film. It's certainly not slop. I'm trying to think like what was the last like non-slop. Yeah, like the last time you were like, wow, that was a really good movie. Oh, you know what it was? It was Tar. I really liked Tar. Remember Tar? Lydia Tar.
Tar.
It was Kate Blanchett.
2000 what?
This was like maybe last year, 2 years ago. It was this kind of epic about a female professor, and it was very like non-woke.
Oh yeah. Okay, I remember that.
Yeah,
the last one I saw that like was I felt could have been was sounds horrible. Manchester by the Sea.
Oh yeah,
like, that
so
stuck
good.
with me a lot.
I still think about that movie.
I do.
Every day.
One or two, like it's like 3 scenes, and I think about them all the time.
I know, it's weird. I've had the same exact thing. I'm always like, why don't I go back and watch that movie? I think about it all the time. I don't feel like I need to.
I don't think I ever need to see that movie again. Like that will just stick with me.
Yeah.
But it's like things. It's things like that. Like, and I kind of digression, but it and this is going to be again, in our own time period. It's only going to be like individual curators, like breaking from the pattern and making their statements. That's going to be that. But eventually, like we need to have some kind of religious understanding of the good. Yeah, that is not driven by this algorithm thing. This liquid democracy, where the most limbic aspects of our personalities, either in their spurg, nihilist, or boomer form, dictate what is going to be considered good or elevated. And in our own time, I think that's going to have to just fall on the shoulders of individual creators, which means that's going to be very, very touch and go.
Yeah, it's going to be kind of hard to do. All right, well, let's finish in the last 15 minutes here of California. So, what's your take? I mean, it seems like you're thinking to move back. Well, maybe not move back.
I probably will eventually, but
I mean, it sounds like you're saying in that piece, which is very inspiring. Like, hey, like, maybe this is land that could be retaken. I mean, I was very under fire after the fires for saying, hey, we could really turn right after this. Mm-hmm. I will say, you completely nailed this whole history of forgetting thing with Southern California. The book, I think one of the definitive books on California, on LA, is called The History of Forgetting.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And it is weird how even with the fires, there is this kind of inertia towards like that. What do you mean the fires?
What
It's
fires?
already gone. It didn't happen. But I don't think it's possible because you go right up the street here to Altadena. It is. I don't think you can cover that up. It's too extreme. It's way too extreme. So I do think there will be an opportunity here to at least get Caruso in office, et cetera. So what's your take on California, and how are you going to be involved in it?
Well, you see, here's the thing. Like, I don't exactly know how this would be accomplished politically because the California political class is like beyond corrupt. I used to live near Sacramento, and that class is just absolutely insane. And I don't really know Southern California very well. I only lived there for a few years, like collectively across my life. But I do know Northern California, and I feel like when I grew up, there was a sense that California had an identity that was like folkish or part of the land, especially like around like the Grateful Dead, and like this idea that we are like there's actually people in California that live there permanently, intergenerationally, and like we're building something here that's supposed to be for all time, that's not directly connected with some industry like tech or Hollywood or oil or marijuana. And I want to see if that cannot be rediscovered in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. So what is that thing? What is that experiment that's being built out here?
Well, I don't know if it's a singular thing, right? That's the thing. Like, I mean, I know when my history of California begins with, and this is a very Catholic perspective, begins with Junipero Serra. And this is a figure that, in my opinion, this is, if I were to make a movie about like a Catholic historical figure like Angel Studios likes doing, which is not my thing. I'm not a big biography person or a big Christian movie person, but I would choose him because this is a person like a Franciscan who like lived as part of the earth. He was in many ways like the first Californian, and he was not like.
So who was he? Juniper.
Yeah, he was a Franciscan. He was a Franciscan monk who built the missions up and down, and which became then the cities in California, right? So San Diego was the first one, and then there was one in San Juan Capistrano, and they're all up and down the coast, right?
Yeah, see, it's like we don't know any of this stuff. People in California, no idea.
And at least because we tore down all of his statues because of his like he believed like he was because he was early 18th century figure. He was a very strong disciplinarian, right? And this
Junipero
Serra, yeah. And he was he's like, oh well, he whipped the Native Americans or whatever, but like this person had a vow of poverty. Like all his life was just spent going up and down the California coast, like to these mission settlements. Like, and these mission settlements became the cities that we know now as San Francisco and San Diego and all of these
that's
places.
all the sands, all the sands going
right?
up.
They're all the mission establishments, right? And this is for me, that's where the story of the land in California, that would be my preferred point of ethnogenesis. Now, obviously there's a whole history of like Anglo American California as well, and sort of like an Ellis Island California after that, and a sort of post-war California even after that. But I feel like at least when I was a child, there was an effort to make this all part of the same story. And not a story of like, this is how like oppression happened in the state of California.
Yeah.
I think that like that happened in the 90s, where the story became like, this is how all the oppressors were defeated by like, the current crop of, San Francisco social justice warriors. But that was never how people imagined it. They imagined it much more as people imagined the history of the West. Like, this is like a lot of crimes, but a lot of heroism at the same time. Like, a lot like stories that like you can pick up and put down, right? And like you can see this like a lot of old histories of California have this too. Like, think about how like when you think about like probably most of Mark Twain's stuff was, I think, written in California, right?
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Like,
Yeah, you never hear about that. That's
well,
for
yeah, I mean,
sure.
like if you want evidence of that, you can go to the old Star Trek episode, right? Do you ever when they go back to San Francisco and Star Trek: Next Generation and they meet Mark Twain and all that?
No, I
Yeah,
don't. I was never a Star Trek guy.
oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. Well, anyway, I mean to geek out on you, but like
That's right.
this is all of these great artists past, even if they were not notably known for being Californian, like Led Zeppelin or Mark Twain, like they had
Yeah.
incredible creative periods here, and like they left their mark on the land, like the whole story of the California oil boom,
Yeah.
all the stuff with like John Steinbeck and Jack London, like this is all part of California history. You scrape any period of California landscape and you'll come up with history. Like this is not some state, like I don't know what. There's probably states that have very little history, like Montana or something. I don't know.
Right. Well, no, and
Yeah.
I think so many of those people were out here writing. That then you hear later, you're like, oh yeah, this writer, I had no idea. At D.H. Lawrence, it'll be like, oh yeah, he was in L.A. for like 10 years, and you're like, what? Like I thought he was in England. Like, well, how the hell did he get to L.A.? Yeah, I think like Faulkner, like a lot of these guys were here. Yeah.
Or even like more recently, like there's even like middle of nowhere towns like Winters, California, like Winters, California, like R. Crumb is from there.
Yeah.
It's like,
it's true. There's a lot.
That's it's just like, and that's like not even like it's barely even on the map, right? It's like Creedence Clearwater Revival, another one people mentioned in the chat, right? Like mostly associated with the South. The thing is, like all of these things, like there is so much history here, but it's just not connected. There's no narrative. There's no place for it to stick.
Not at all.
So just like
nobody knows what any of this stuff is.
Water off the duck's back.
Yeah.
Water off the duck's back. It doesn't. There's no overarching culture for it to stick in. There's no folk culture for it to stick in. And I guess people say, well, that's why everyone comes here, is because it's so easy to leave. Which is kind of like the opposite of the Eagles song, very famously. But like, but at the same time, like, there is something indelible about California, and it does have a quality to it, even though it's kind of otherworldly, and it does feel like it has kind of a folk and a destiny that could be there. It just doesn't materialize yet, and who knows if that's possible or if we're in the right age for that. But it does feel like something more needs to be said about the Golden State before it kind of gets consumed up its own ego.
Well, I think it will. I think everything you're saying is completely right, but we also do have to remember that it is brand new. I mean, like in comparison to a lot of these other places, California is very young, isn't it?
Yeah, but Junipero Serra, he's like the contemporary of the founding fathers, right?
Is he? Oh, wow. Okay, so
I mean, like, give me his life.
He is. Look at that. Wow. Okay, so he was there for a while.
Yeah, so I mean, this is like California is old, like it's new as a.
It's new America. It's new
as an American property, but it has a whole history before it. You ever read 2 years Before the Mast or whatever, that book? That's like this guy like. California comes into United States possession, and this guy from like Princeton or New Jersey or something was like he decides that he's this rich guy and decides that he just gets bored and decides to take a trip around like to visit like the West Coast on like this this trade ship. And he just looks at California. He's like, "This place is awesome. Why is no one living here? This is all United States. Why is nobody living in this state?" And it was like the first book about California that really put it on the map, so to speak, as a destination.
I guess somebody is bringing up the gold. We do have that. We do kind of have. That's like the one cultural California thing we have is like gold rush. Everybody
but then there's
agrees.
The oil rush.
Yeah.
And I don't know. There's so many things like that. I mean, I guess like you can kind of see all these different components of California kind of coming together. It's not just the gold rush. There's a whole history of California before the gold rush.
Yeah,
the gold rush was the first Anglo event in California.
Right.
That was before that it was mostly Spanish and Mexican. So the gold rush was the first Anglo event in California.
Well,
But
there was also a siege. Wasn't this like a big part of the Spanish-American War? I think there was a siege of Los Angeles. Like Los
the
Angeles was like
Spanish
a
American, the
battleground.
Mexican American
Sorry,
War.
the Mexican War.
Yeah,
Mexican War. Yeah.
I think maybe really far south, right? I always think of the main theaters of war being in like Texas, but we
Yeah, well,
definitely
that's
did
what you're
get.
right. No, but there was a war, there was a siege, there was a fight in LA. There was like an actual
Oh,
like
really?
battle. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, I know,
yeah,
which is
wow.
weird. No, again, no one knows about this.
Yeah,
Nobody talks about
we
it.
forgot about that really quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a great LA writer that if you haven't found him, really one of the most unsung writers of all time, named John Fonte. Do you know John
That
Fonte?
sounds familiar. I haven't read him though.
Yeah, John Fonte was kind of the proto Bukowski. He was sort of a follower of Newt Hampson. He's kind of the original like Gonzo modernist writer kind of thing, and he was writing in downtown LA in the 1930s, and it's just fantastic. Totally based, crazy Italian guy writer. If you haven't seen him.
Yeah, I think though, like to answer your question, I definitely want to check that out. By the way, but
No,
like
yeah.
in order for us to kind of like the answer to California and the answer to escape slop is in my mind is like the same answer. It's like a return to the people and the land and like the blood and the connection between the two of them, right? That's what makes like American fiction when it occurs rare but like really good. And well, that's what makes all fiction really good, to be quite honest. And and it doesn't mean that there can't be any contradiction or any multiculturalism. Like contradiction and multiculturalism are always part of these stories, but like deep lineage and connection also is part, and continuity are also part of those stories. And like that's I don't say any way to escape slop without obviously also connection to religion as well. But then again, like, in order for religion to really take, like, there's individual revelation, but then there's sort of like the covenant, right? And the covenant needs to be with like a land and a people, like in the Old Testament, right? That's what people kind of forget, that, salvation is individual, but it's also, I don't want to delve into heresy, but it's also not entirely individual. There's also this weird collective component that seems to be kind of like sitting in the background that we as kind of like Faustian Westerners don't want to touch, but don't really have language to describe. Well, in the Old Testament, people will talk about like chosen people and the lineage of Abraham. Yeah. And right, and even in the medieval period, people will talk about like cursed people or whatever like that. But then when we get to like post-Reformation, when like Faustian culture comes into itself, so like any time that we really think of as like properly Western culture, in the medieval times, Faustian culture is still developing. Anytime after that, like religion is almost entirely, even its Catholic form, it's almost entirely an individual experience, right? Like, this is my salvation, this is my belief, this is my testimony. And the collective dimension of how like your family is part of this religion or your faith tradition or covenant is kind of like pushed to the side. It's more implicit, but this is just my speculation. In the new age, that might have to become more explicit. And I don't, and people are like, how do you manage that in the modern world? I have no idea, but like it's just the 500-pound gorilla in the room or whatever they say, right? It's that kind of collective connection to land and peoplehood is just something. It's so prominent in ancient religious scriptures, even the Old Testament, like I said, or the Hebrew scriptures. And it's so far away from our modern conceptualization of spirituality that, like, I think that more work needs to be done figuring out exactly how to imagine the connection.
Like blood and soil, basically.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it sounds crude when you say it that way, right?
No, I say, hey.
I'm saying like every time you say blood and soil, you think of some like Hick.
Yeah, it's Hitler,
like,
right? Yeah,
yeah, whatever. But there's something like when you like. But if I talk to you about Faulkner, right? Faulkner like doesn't make any sense without understanding the blood and soil.
Right.
Like, it doesn't, right? Like, so there's
when I say blood and soil, I mean Faulkner, not Hitler. It's not Hitler.
or like There Will Be Blood, or like Leonard O'Connor, like any piece of art, right? Like even like the Grateful Dead doesn't make sense without blood and soil to a certain extent. Like, so it's like we've got this block as modern people, and like something about the formula is behind this block that's missing to our approach to this. And, that's what we're trying to, bring to the fore with criticism and all that, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, but it's also time. It's time, right? I mean, that's a little bit of I think blood and soil comes with time, kind of, right? And I think that's maybe what's missing in California, is that it's like the time, it just hasn't been long enough. But I think what you're saying about the monks, or the Franciscans, that really should be a lot more present in the soul of California. Have you ever been to San Juan Capistrano?
Oh yeah, love it.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah,
and it's got this feeling of like, whoa, this is like an old school monk place. Like I'm
more familiar with the more northern ones around Monterey.
Yeah,
because those are closer to where I lived. You know the ones that are down south, right?
Right. Yeah.
And the northernmost one I think was in San Francisco. I think that's as far as they got, right?
Yeah.
But it's amazing. I love it. And it also it's the swallows, the San Juan Capistrano are the that's I like to use that as an analogy for Californians, right? Like the swallows, they always migrate back to Mexico when they get older, but then when they come back to have their children, they always come back to the San Juan Capistrano to build their swallows nests, right? They come back to the church, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Very Catholic, that has a lot of analogous power, metaphorical power for me. But I love the missions. That's just like, to me, that is prime California. Well, I mean, that is the California ethnogenesis that I see as being primary, and not to put down the WASP ethnogenesis and the gold rush and all that, right?
Yeah, right. No, it's right. Maybe that's the key. My friend says that we're waiting for this, waiting for a leader who's like kind of a Anglo-coded Mexican Catholic, who like is in Huntington Beach. Not Nick Fuentes. No, different. The whole other side of the spectrum. Yeah. He's like kind of a freewheeling guy named Duck Hernandez, who drives like a pickup truck in Huntington Beach, and he comes from like an old Mexican family, and he's kind of like Hunter Biden, like Mexican Hunter Biden vibes, exactly. Who like gets sober in his 40s and is like, I'm gonna try to take control of California. Like that's who we need. We need like handsome freewheeling. Yeah, Hunter Biden of Mexicans,
like the Emperor of California. I would love to write a story, like like kind of a speculative fiction story about like an ex-druggie who he's just in the right place at the right time and becomes Emperor of California. Like this myth unfurls about him that's like part fictional and part true. And that would be like, I feel like that's just waiting to happen in California for something.
I know. It's just, because I think you're right. It's like we crave blood and soil, especially after all this ridiculousness. But okay, I'll let you get out of here. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. So
what were you gonna say?
It's like Paul Kingsnorth also is talking about this too. He's British, but I think he's thinking about this whole mendicant tradition and its connection to the land as well. But that's a whole other can of worms. So
okay. All right. Well, what's up these days? Where can anything to shill, anything to talk about? We got a bunch of people on the stream. So.
My Substack is Fiddler's Grain, letters from Fiddler's Grain at substack.com. And my YouTube channel is called The Distributist, which was what most people know me for. And I'll be doing more podcasting on YouTube, and then more essays, hopefully. I'm going to do more writing, hopefully, this year. But that's my thing.
Cool, man. One of the best in the space. So everybody follow Dave. And thanks so much, man. We'll talk to you later.